This conference will now be recorded.
Capacity, practices, regulation, and trade-offs. My name is Risa Shimoda with the River Management Society, and I welcome you here. Our complement will introduce ourselves in a second. But thanks. This is one of a series of our River Management Roundtable discussions. They're open to anyone. We host them twice a month, and we have kind of two tracks. One is kind of operational, and one is with topics like this, permits and capacity and conflicts. And the other one, we talk about more kind of personal development things. We have been speaking about culture, identity, defining oneself, voices, and working better with others in our workplaces. So I guess I skipped a slide. You want to go back to the other one, Angie? I didn't rehearse enough. But so Angie, you want to wave? You probably know Angie from our River Training Center coordinator, who does all the behind the scenes stuff awesomely and manages all the webinars and is a great asset and leader in our organization. And me, I'm the River Management Society ED. And Liz Lacey, wave to us, Liz. You're one of the only faces that are showing herself. A longtime volunteer, community planner for National Park Service up in New England on Partnership Wild and Scenic Rivers. So today is about sharing and learning from each other on a topic that is of great interest. And we can get going. We have an hour, which is barely enough to scratch the surface. And Angie, you want to give us sort of ground rules here? Because it might be a little different than some other meetings you've been to.
Yeah, thanks, Risa. So as some of you can see, we've got a good turnout today. Right now, there's 32 of us. Even more people registered that might be showing up. It's a little bit larger than our some of our previous river management roundtables. And so we're asking that if you have any questions to use that chat box and ask those questions in the chat. And when you're not speaking, if you can stay on mute, just so we reduce the feedback for everyone. If someone has a question and you have like a follow-up, like solution or answer to their question, then it might be okay to come off of mute and share that with everyone. But we're really going to just encourage people to keep their eyes on that chat as well. You can also answer people's questions in the chat. If you have resources to share, again, today is about you. And if you are going to come off mute and speak, if you could just keep your comments on topic and concise, just so that everyone can share, that'd be great.
Cool. So and the format, you know, to kind of frame the discussions, so it doesn't get too crazy. We'll have a couple of topics, just a small handful. So we'll kind of go over those concepts, and then feel free to chat away. And then when we kind of get to the end of that, you know, set of topics, we'll encourage, like Angie was saying, offers of success and suggestions. And this is such a big topic. We were going to, but decided not to put a little cartoon of a whiner at the bottom of the slide. So no whining today, but we'd like to share how we've overcome successes, and sharing a challenge is fine. No whining. So capacity, the word capacity is completely how you define it. And the ideal, if you're looking at a management document, is to set or maintain or protect the experience that you want people to have. You have an awesome river, you have awesome things around it to look at and to do and to enjoy before, on, after your experience on the river. And so in order to be able to set a system up to protect that experience or maintain it, you got to understand it, whether it's quantifying or having a good description of what you have now, and an agreement with your work team, with your community, with your organization, with your partners about what you want it to be, you know, going forward, which could be really different than it is now. It could be keeping status quo because it's perfect the way it is. That sounds really simple. We know that it's not, because the reality is that there's no number, there's no simple answer. Everyone would like to see the algorithm or the formula, and even if you could come up with one in an ideal situation, then designing that, monitoring that, maintaining that, warding off distractions is, are all the components that you all are, I'm sure, familiar with. So last year we thought we saw huge crowds, and this year we realized they're not going away. So in terms of thinking of your capacity of the river or the rivers that you manage, thinking to come up with what your current conditions are, just to think of what's reasonable, what's manageable, what's affordable, what we absolutely have to have versus what's kind of nice, but we won't worry about it right now. And then how might you implement? And you can implement in a variety of ways. You can implement it in a tiered fashion. You can implement with a phasing fashion, but usually you can't just like suddenly have the capacity or get to a capacity, and that's not realistic. Any questions or any questions just about like that, or any comments? I'm not watching the chat here. Okay, no questions, no chats. I guess we could keep on going and then we'll just start talking. So one element of managing it or setting up your expectations is to look at where you have control, and literally where you can create a valve, create a limit, create a means to manage where you can count it, look at it, take a picture, and so forth. So the options are, excuse me, the options are different if you are, depending on the property you're talking about. If you're partnered, if you're on the lower Delaware Wapsinkee River or the Farmington River, there is no federal land. You can't control nothing hardly because it's all public. There's a grocery store parking lot. There's a county park. There might be a private landowner that lets people put in on his or her property periodically, versus when you're in a federally managed entity where you can close the gate. That doesn't always solve a problem completely because people start parking all over, but you have some metering or control valves. Permits is another means for control. Parking can be a means for control if you can control that. Certainly it's a physical place. And then with all of that, enforcement is a means of control. So, and the pictures are just an example of Ruby Horse Thief. I use that one because I can't remember how long it was ago, but there, for many years, Ruby Horse Thief was all messed up with tamarisk. It was so thick. It was very, very, well, it's been a beautiful place to paddle with hiking and so forth. If you're not familiar, it goes from, starts a little bit in Colorado and then goes down through Utah and ends up at where Westwater Canyon starts, managed by the BLM. But after being really popular and appreciated for a long time, tamarisk grew and became an impediment to camping. And after 10 or 12 years of working really hard on the tamarisk, suddenly there was fabulous camping. People rediscovered the river, and it was a nightmare for crowds. So the BLM kind of wrung their hands and talked about a permit system, implemented a permit system that goes during the high season, I think from April to November. And it has both allowed them to pay for the folks who are at the launch ramp helping out, keeping it clean, keeping tamarisk sort of at bay, and taking care of the campsites and so forth. So they're very happy. The transition was hard. So that's just a kind of recent big big success. And the parking lot down on the bottom, just illustrative of there are places where you can actually close it. So all of these are elements of capacity, and most of you wouldn't use all of them, and some of you might use, all of them to manage, how you want to view traffic, how you want to disperse traffic, and your means of management. We have one question, Jimmy. Do we have some examples of must have versus not nice to have? Does anyone have a suggestion of that when you were doing your planning? And there are some things that you must have in terms of you have to address like agency requirements, or you might need to have to protect a value, if you're wild and scenic, or you must have in order to address jurisdictional, municipal, the borough, or the township type requirements versus nice to have. I can think of one, Jimmy, that would be parking would be a drop-off point for large buses in an area, a parking facility where there was a turnaround for large buses would be might be a must-have depending on the other parking. And in some places it might just be a nice to have. It's a really huge parking lot where you can loop around, but so you don't need a specific like turnaround area. Janine says here, I think this is the answer to your question too. Portable toilet versus a flush restroom. Gravel parking for 10 cars versus paved parking. Gordon says, don't scenic rivers have control of the water even if they don't own the land? Could they not limit the numbers on the water? Gordon's River is really unusual. You're on the Niobrara, and you might help explain if this is incorrect, but on the Niobrara, the Park Service does not control anything on land. The access points do not belong to the Park Service. So maybe someone can chime in here, but I'd say if you wanted to control the numbers that are on the river, you'd have to partner with if it's BLM, those who own the property. Anybody else in the Niobrara are familiar with it here? Or is there anyone here who manages a river but does not control the access points? It seems supremely challenging. Anybody?
Hey, Risa, this is David Cernacek. I can speak for, there's significant case law for, wild and scenic rivers where, the federal, there's federal management, but private, they're private access, whereas, like say on the salmon, a jet boat company has, a private in holding is, loaded a raft and 10 people in a jet boat and driven 20 miles upstream and launched the raft from the jet boat, never touching federal land, and just rafted back to that private in holding. Generally in that case, the judge said yes, the federal agency does have management control of those people, and no, that is an illegal thing to do, even though they didn't touch Forest Service land on either side of the river. The managing agency, the administrating agency, still has control of that, and that is an illegal act.
So it sounds like it might be worth folks who are working on the rivers to investigate that aspect of access to the river. And different states might have different water rights and that sort of thing. Property owners do own into the river in some places, and so they can have a different take on it in different areas. So it might be worth investigating that in your own situation.
Risa, you're muted if you're.
Thank you, Angie.
Mhm.
John Kresge just shared the Arkansas River Recreation Act. John, could you tell us what's in there? What does that mean? Thank you for sharing it, maybe what the significance, where that might help other folks. Hey, Johnny there. Thank you. And with Gordon, that's what I understood from John White, that you do have authority on the water, but you don't have authority at the access points to be able to count, stop, meter people.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you go, John.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, so in 1989, they declared this Article 12.5, the Arkansas River Recreational Act, and basically it gave the authority to manage the surface of the water for all recreation, commercial and private, because there was an issue with private landowners when you'd launch from a private landowner site that that they weren't wanted to pay the fees or the use fees for that. So they created this to have the AHRA, Arkansas Headwaters Recreation Area, to do manage all the recreation on the surface of the water. So no matter where you launched, we can control the capacities, both private and commercial, that are on the surface of the water. It also gave the not to any way interfere with the landowner rights along the river, meaning they own the riverbed, the rocks that are on the river. So it was something that was put in, and it has worked very well by controlling, again, the surface of the water, and then those who get on it and where they take out. We are in a co-op agency with Bureau of Land Management, so we do have some lease lands that we work with them, and other access points, how this park developed.
That sounds like something worth following up in various states. When you are in a partnership situation and you have all these different entities, it might be worthwhile having the state look at a way to be able to have something to say about what goes on in a packaged sort of way on the surface of the water.
Yes, it's gotten to the point though where now we're trying to manage all recreation purposes, but landowners now understand that they can conduct commercial on their private property, and that's where we're at a loss of managing what the private landowner can do. And what we were trying to do was to say, okay, it's fine for the private landowner to do whatever they want on their land, but when they bring a third party in, then that's where we want to intervene and start managing that third party on their lands. So something that we're working with right now with walk and wade access and the number of permits out there and what landowners are going to do, because we're seeing it just like everywhere else. There is venture capitalists that are buying up properties, and they're creating their clubs, their private access points, and charging a rod fee. So something that we're trying to handle here on the Ark right now.
So you just have to, when you hear of somebody, you have to just chase it down because they're not discoverable unless you just hear about it.
Yeah, and what we're trying to do is again start to look at maybe a landowner permit specifically for a landowner, because yeah, we could control the fishery by saying you can only take so many fish out of the river, but again, we want that landowner to be part of the community, and those that have been in this community since the Arkansas River Recreational Act, everybody has a share in the game. And so it's disturbing when you get a landowner who go ahead and purchase a large amount of river frontage and does not want to participate in the community of what we've done so far. So that's something that we're working on right now, that how can we engage private landowners, part of the community, part of the resource, part of the other that are permitted.
Mhm. Is there anyone before we go on? Are there those who have been involved in planning processes to develop capacities or capacity plan or user capacity program or monitoring that would like to share what they have? Anyone? Okay, we have another question. What ideas and examples do people have of managing capacity for a wild scenic river corridor with directly adjacent private camping parking that's primarily accessed for recreation in the corridor? Can set a capacity for people, but what is the control point if the boundary between adjacency camping and river corridor is porous? Ooh.
The $1 million question. Sort of the the non-federal lands river issue is all this sort of non-point source access to the river, and how do you get to that? That's sort of a huge question, and I for one am interested if people have had success on non-federal rivers, federally owned rivers, doing controls like Steve's asking about. If there's anybody out there who has examples, we'd love to hear it.
Like Liz on the Farmington, how many different access points are there? Or if you add the traditional ones and and all the rogue ones, how many would you say over how many miles of river?
Well, it's the Upper Farmington in Connecticut is a 15-mile stretch, and I'd say there are probably maybe half a dozen actual sort of not even real access sites, but fairly decent access sites. And you can get in anywhere. I mean, there's 2 roads on either side, of the river. There's campgrounds, there's parking lots, there's people's backyards, there's everything. And wherever anyone wants to get in, they could just pretty much get in. So I couldn't even count. It's just an endless amount of access. And so my thinking anyway is that it's an effort to get everybody on board, sort of like we were just talking about, private property owners, county landowners, state landowners, town landowners, everybody to sort of work together in a cohesive group to try to figure out a way to, sit at a table together, get on a Zoom call together, whatever, and figure out ways to actually work on a cohesive way that everyone understands how they want to work together to keep people from overcrowding. And that to me, I have not seen it happen ideally yet. I think it's a work in progress in a lot of places, but I'd love to hear if other people have had any success in that approach.
Mm-hmm.
Liz, has anybody tried a permit program on those types of rivers? Like a obtain one off the rec.gov?
That is actually, sort of been floating around, so to speak, that idea. No one in any of the rivers I work on, I don't think anyone has done that, but we have heard of even free permits that you just need to be able to go online and get this free permit so that you can actually have legitimate parking in legitimate parking places and that sort of thing. But this is a challenge. It's a challenge when there are a lot of small towns, a lot of different people changing characters over time. To get everybody to agree that this is the way to go. But I'm thinking it's worth really the effort to head in that direction and to head towards perhaps an app that everyone joins into, a regional app on a river, help coordinate, talk about that. But it looks like things are popping up in the chat over here.
Other than the federal issue, the Fossil Creek years ago, we, basically, counted up how many possible parking places there were and, had a parking permit system of just all the places that there were to park. And it's like, beyond that, there's no more parking here. So there's 143 parking permits that can be purchased today. And that was put on rec.gov and it worked.
That sounds great.
Mm-hmm. Kevin says a solution could be day use is not limited, but camping is limited. And if most people camp, then there you go. That's the control.
Yeah, and more than limited, it's provided. So they create capacity for camping or meet the demand by creating camping and then making it reservable. So it's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it alleviated camping elsewhere by making nice reservable sites that were public.
Right. And is all that done online?
Yes. Well, the new program on the Blackfoot, as I understand it, you actually have to call.
On a phone?
On a phone.
Wow.
Great.
So that's one element of employing any system. It, really needs to be easy to administer, so they don't have to go hire somebody to check tags or whatever. Because the manualness of the administration can then get overwhelming or be too expensive. John is saying bigger usage now after permit season. Oh, that's one. So that's a good example of what happens with when people are discovering a resource, and first they're cramming into the permits and making the permit system explode. They're discovering, like, more seasoned boaters of going outside the season. So if you want to go in the Grand Canyon, it's really easy. You just go in January, and that's good, for people who can make it outside the window, and then they have a better experience and don't pressure the system as much.
It disperses the use a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Right. Any other suggestions of effects of how to establish a system, identify what currently is and the elements of what your kind of the contributors to your current capacity, so that you can then move forward and identify what your ideal capacity would be, or what your controls might be to control them. Kevin, can you say more about the Nantahala program?
Sure. I mean, as I understand it, the folks, people have to get the wristband at an outfitter usually, Nantahala Outdoor Center, which is at the takeout, and you have to have one to paddle. Trying to remember the Forest Service jargon for how they do it, but I think they make it it's like a special day off to send you something about it. But yeah, it's some sort of special recreation area that allows them to kind of control a greater area, including the water, even though it's private. Other people probably know more than me. I just know you need a wristband, and it's very porous, and it's
So
federal.
this is a little bit different, but on the lower yacht, so they control numbers by making you get $2 permit, I think, that you get online, and you walk up to the little office and you put a tag on your boat. That allows you to get a shuttle out of this gorge where there's no parking. So pretty much mandatory, and it's really easy. Little guy in a bus drives up and down the hill all day long, and he takes your ticket, and you can go up to your car. It only, now they've changed it, so it's only required on the weekends. So during the week, you can drive down to the takeout, like a steep little, street and hill, but there are very few people there. So the ticket and the shuttle out is the control there.
Yeah, I think going back to, looking at the wristband idea and some of these other things, there's a certain amount of staffing that you have to have, or at least some pretty serious volunteers who are willing to do the, looking at people's wrists to make sure they have the wristband on. If you're in a staffed area, it might be a little bit easier, but a lot of these places just don't have staff. So it's really important to beef up the participation of partners along the river, whether it be volunteer groups or town rec departments or whatever. I would say that somehow or another we have to get into the mindset of getting folks to play roles in these schemes that they're not used to playing, because otherwise, I mean, we just can't hire enough people, right, to cover some of this stuff. Is that what other folks might think as well?
People definitely need to see value for what they're paying for. If you're asking them to chip in for management, they need to see, clean bathrooms. They need to see, they need to see personnel working. They need to see, ramps that are moving and being managed. Charging any type of fee for anything does not work if people are only seeing heavy enforcement and dirty bathrooms with no toilet paper. There's a lot to asking for money. If you're not doing your part, people will not generally support things. What I'm finding is people are very supportive of paying something when they see things get so astronomically overcrowded and unmanageable. They don't want to see that. They are willing to help pay for the infrastructure to manage the river if they have to. And they're actually happy to pay for rangers if it means they can get to a boat ramp within an hour of arriving at the ramp, or not having to deal with, intimidating people or ugliness.
I also feel like I might want to explain what that second bullet is. That it might not be obvious. Water control versus access control. So there's some, Kevin, maybe you know this better than me, but some of the hydropower recreational releases where there were a couple of release days, American White Water worked with the utility to have different levels of flow on Saturday versus Sunday to kind of distribute the type of boaters that would come. So that's sort of water control versus access control.
One type of control that's not there that we do on the Snake is we dealt with our big groups. We had very, very big groups that were coming, 80 to 150 people at a time, all showing up at, to launch at pretty much 10 o'clock and 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And that completely overwhelmed our facilities, our parking lots, our bathrooms, our everything. We have capacity for groups, just smaller size groups. And, we can deal with smaller size groups throughout the day. As long as we smooth out those spikes, we can deal with it. We went to a group permit system. So groups have to be between 16 and 30 people. They can have multiple launches through the day. It's a free permit system. But they start at 8 in the morning, and every 20 minutes another group launches. We can't do the 150 people. We don't do groups over 30 people, but we still deal with groups. We still, scouts, religious groups, all that type of stuff. But they're smoothed out through the day, and we have chances to educate them through using the permit system. They have to get that ahead of time. And that's one thing that we've done to deal with capacity that has been relatively successful is just not having them all come at us at once. And if we can have these people check in with us, it's an online system. We can have them check in with us beforehand. We can talk to them. We can educate them. We can talk to them about the behavior we want to see. We can get driver's licenses before we have to write them a ticket if we have to. We can do a lot of stuff that has really warded off a lot of our bad stuff, including illegal outfitting that we were dealing with, before our system. And just one idea for dealing with bigger stuff.
Would you actually have one group that was larger than 30, like a 50-person group in one group? Or now you're
We
just
don't do that. If they bring 60 people, they can do 2 launches of 30.
Right.
But our cap is at 30 people. If you need to have over 30 people, you need to go find a different river or a different section of river. But we had to set a number somewhere, and we set it at 30, which is kind of our maximum size for our group campgrounds as well.
John, have you had to do something like that where you have big clogs, like at 11 o'clock Saturday morning, and you've had to disperse people or meter them out or something with some kind of guide, aside from what how the outfitters are scheduled? If you're talking, we can't hear you. Any input there, John? No. Can't hear you. Your microphone looks green, but we can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Are you referring to me on the Arkansas?
Yeah, because you have the crowds.
Yeah, no, we don't limit any group size. We have a pod size, 10 boats per pod. And that's just basically so that the other users can not get behind a long line of boats. So there is a pod size to split. Your pod is up by 300 feet. We haven't gone to any type of launch times. We are experiencing heavy use at the Hecla Junction in Browns Canyon, primarily by private boaters. And same thing, private boaters during the COVID, and currently it tends to be 1 or 2 people per car. So that's where the parking lot gets full. But we haven't gone to that measure yet.
Great. Well, thanks. If you have any other questions, put them in the chat. But Angie, I guess we could go to the next slide. It's sort of another aspect of this identifying your capacity, and that is influencing the behavior of those who come, besides a hard control through just suggesting message and media and frequency. So what you say, the media that you use to communicate, and how often you say it to folks. Maybe spring, you're saying something in the spring and reminding them in the summer, and maybe you're thanking them in the fall. Video, of course, TV, radio, signage, If you did it all at once, people would get a message, and then on-site interpretive staff, of course, that costs money, but where there are, if this interpretive staff is saying exactly the same thing as people have heard or seen, then that helps. Asking your partners, if you're an agency having nonprofit partners or communities, do the same thing, say the same thing, and share the same message. And then measure what you can, where you're able to see how many hits, how many views, how many returns, how long people are staying on a website, that kind of thing. Only, and that it matters only relative to where you start. So if you don't know, you start somewhere and begin to measure and then see what your messaging does in terms of more people seeing it. And maybe you can correlate that with behavior. For instance, we love you. If you want no crowds, show up at 9 o'clock instead of 11, or come in the late afternoon. You still have plenty of time to make it down the river. See if that has kind of any effect. Does anyone have any suggestions or experiences like that have been successful for, like the word Liz used earlier, dispersing use?
Yeah, I can speak to that for the Arkansas. We posted it on our website, and the information I just shared. Anytime capacities go over 75% on that, we go into a user education effort to redistribute that use to different sections of the river. And that worked through whitewater clubs, boating clubs. We didn't really reach out on the media side, but Facebook and the clubs are the ones that were sharing that information. And of course, it get to the people that come to the launch and try to understand what we're trying to do. But it's all in the management plan of when we reach a certain amount of prescribed capacity, that 75%, then it is an education effort to disperse that to other sections of the river. It worked well. In fact, we do all our private boat counts by a photographer who shoots everybody between the hours of 9 and 5. I know we're not capturing all the boaters after 5, but we did see it the days that we prescribed, and they were around the festivals, the Paddle Fest Festival and Memorial Day weekend and the Fib Art Festival. And these are just relating to Browns Canyon. So we did see an effort, and we saw the effort work, that they did go to other sections of the river for that particular day.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's awesome. Have you been doing that for a long time?
This was the first year, because in 2020 we hit that prescribed over 75%. So we count the boats. The following year we target that day if it's a weekend by a festival, and then we push it out to say these are the days you have to avoid or would like you to avoid. There is no mandatory, but again, if we don't, and if we go over more than 5 times of the capacity for private boaters, 100%, we will be going into a permit system, is what the management plan called for.
Oh. Do you tell people that? It's hard to know. You do?
Yeah, so if you go to our website and go under private boaters, you'll see the whole kind of the definition of how we're following the management plan, which was finalized of June of 2019. We do a revision every 10 years. And we also have the flexibility to exchange from commercial to private boater capacities. We can say we see a low use in this section for commercial. We'll exchange boat capacities from commercial to private in certain sections of the river. And it's been done before. It's, here it's set in stone that we work towards, but then we have this, oh, well, we can make exceptions, because our numbers are hard to tell why they came up with 240 boats in Browns Canyon for private boaters. Nobody has a solid why 240 boats other than, oh, that seems like that would be overcrowding if we went over that plus the commercial of 360. So not getting complaints on the river, getting complaints at the parking lot.
Boaters take up more parking spaces than rafters.
Yeah, so that sort of reminds me of, the ability to communicate to people who are coming to your river, especially like in our situations on partnership rivers where, there isn't one entry to the park where, rangers or somebody could say to you, such and such area is closed, we've got a full parking lot already, you might try this area or that area. We've got to figure out ways to reach people who are just coming from all different areas to have fun on your river, and be able to keep them up to date on, where it's crowded and where it's not crowded and where parking is still available and that sort of thing. So, one idea that's popped up occasionally is an app that all your partners participate in and provide information to. But I think, that again needs some pretty constant care and some staffing to make sure that people are, keeping in touch with the different areas and figuring out what's going on. And in a lot of places, you may have this constant barrage of people, but I guess in some places there's also, just weekends might be the tough time, or holiday, or certain hot weather or something like that. So might be worth thinking about some kind of regional approach to communicating to people who are coming to the area and getting them dispersed before they even get on the river.
Thanks for that link, John.
I'll throw out there that you can't really change behavior once people get to the river. If they didn't bring a life jacket, they didn't bring a life jacket, or, proper gear to wear or anything. The main work you need to do is before people ever leave their home or their town or whatever to come to your river. You can hang up all the safety posters and stuff that you want, but, once they get there, they're pretty focused on getting into a boat and going down that water. So, the best work you can do is getting information out there and education out there long before they get in the car to come your direction. And to us, one of our biggest things is every catastrophe that we deal with early season, we put a press release out, and we also proactively pursue all of our media sources and get the information out there about, how cold the water is. It's maybe 80 degrees air temperature, but the water's still in the 40s, and don't dress for the weather, the air temperature, dress for the water temperature, because, that's, we do have early season crash and burns. We have, religious groups that, and scout groups that are our biggest rescue load, and we get those in the paper and we get them covered, and we make sure they go into those areas, that in those media areas where those groups are coming from. All of it, I send them to the scout, the upper scout levels. I send them to the Tower of Power for the religions that they're coming from, and I make it very clear. One of my biggest statements is in newspaper articles is your life should be worth at least $60 to you. Go with an outfitter, and we incentivize our outfitters here. They each get 3 days where they can become super big outfitters. Have 4 additional boats of 16 customers each for 2 different launches a day to offer those super cheap Groupon level, poor Boy Scout group or whatever it is, that they have the capacity to offer super cheap trips and be a really big company a few times out of the year. And that's really important to us. But getting that information out there early season, reporting on the crashes and burns and why those people crashed and burned in rental boats, that type of stuff. And, trying to push that business to outfitters that aren't going to crash and burn is a really important part of your early season operations. Otherwise, you tend to lose people all summer long.
Thanks, Dave. So here are a couple of some creative, well, some are not so creative, but a couple of different ways to deal with planning your capacity or looking at your current capacity. The top one is build another parking lot. Like this really cool parking lot was built, and it's in New Jersey. It cost $850,000, $840,000, but it's really nice and is, being well used. On the left, this is near me, and I think this is killer. There's a parking lot that is free and very convenient and belongs to a county, a water purveyor, water treatment organization, and the National Park Service. So none of them manage it. It's like this weird property. So it's always a mess, and it's in a neighborhood. So people are parking all over it's free. People are parking all over, like a mile down the road. And usually it's so full of traffic that cars and bikers are having trouble. And if you're walking with the boat, it's very dangerous. So the county put up these those are just like those little parking cement things that you see in a parking lot with those stanchions between them. They're temporary. They went up in April, and they'll go away in October, and you can't drive over them. You cannot park there. And that's a bike lane and a walking lane. So now it's safe, and there are parking lots a mile away, so people just park a little further. Or they'll do a boat drop off. So it's that's a control, but it's very creative because, no one had seen it before. But it came through a collection of Zoom community whining sessions. The county came up with this really great solution. So anyway, that's a mile of those things. On the right, this is on South Fork of the American, which has been one of the most, busy commercial and private boater rivers. The community got together and bought a van and a trailer, and the community runs a group shuttle. And they volunteer, and they always pitch in, they wash the van, and it's a fabulous thing that keeps cars, like to John's point, it keeps private boaters from clogging up 2 parking lots. So that really helps a lot. Of course, that's a lot of work, but it's a tight community, and it's been working for 20 years, 25 years, something like that. Bill says, has anyone had to deal with OHV use within a wild and scenic corridor? I didn't know that could happen. And you also, and then Kevin says, Chattooga Wild Scenic River has Jeeps in the river regularly. But Kevin, are they specifically forbidden, or they just go there and?
No, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Right.
I don't know if they're being dealt with, they're just there.
Right.
For observation.
If there's a prior to designation, it's yours. Mm-hmm. Right.
Biggest thing with OHV is to always give them loops. If they have loops, they're happy. If they don't have loops, they will create loops and create more trail on you. But they can operate without devastating impacts, most definitely.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other questions?
Back to Risa's shuttles, the best, having a dependable shuttle at your takeout. I had one for years, but people were too cheap to use it, so we went out of business. But if people know coming down to the river that there's going to be a shuttle at the end that will take them back up, you will reduce your cars in your parking lot massively. I had a guy that would take you and your boat back up to the put-in for $5. And, when I knew that guy was going to be there and everybody in town knew that guy was going to be there, I reduced, my parking lots would have 30 or 40 less cars in it during the day because, those that were willing to pay, the cheap people would hitchhike still. But, that really reduces opens up so much capacity in your parking lots when people know they don't have to bring multiple cars down to the river. So that is a huge thing for gaining capacity in your parking lots. Also, figuring out a way to put lines in your parking lots that are dirt is another great way to find capacity in your parking lots. I use those little flowers that they use to identify utilities underground, those little sprigs of color, plastic things. If you lay out parking spots with those things, you'll find that you can double the parking in your dirt parking lots when people know where to park. Just 2 cents.
Yeah. So John's saying ATVs off-roading on the Rogue River, working on closing trails coming off private land into the Forest Service. That's that forest border again. John, you want to explain what you're doing, or how you're trying to get around the private Forest Service land here?
Well, they're coming off an easement, so I'm working with a couple property owners to find out where the use is coming from. But yeah, it's just you got to get law enforcement involved, which is really hard when you don't have it.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. So it might not sound like it, but all these elements contribute to how, if you're developing a capacity related plan, these are all elements of it. The hard controls, the working with partners to manage as you can, communicating about what you want to do, what folks should expect at the river before they get there. And keep on asking questions if you have them, but because this is so complicated, we thought maybe there might be an interest in just focusing on one element of capacity. So if there's interest in just talking about permits, or just talking about public-private land interface, or just talking about communicating, you're in the on the Farmington River and your people are coming from Long Island. How in the world do you communicate with them before they get to the river? If you have any suggestions and it doesn't occur to you right now, feel free to let us know. People aren't going to go away, so the need to think about how to creatively manage use on the river with new types of users and so forth is not going to go away either. Let's see. Gordon says something interesting here. Fish and Wildlife prohibits alcohol and craft. We do not. Does anyone else prohibit alcohol? I want to encourage nature-oriented users, but not partiers. We could accommodate more of the former without affecting the resource. Here's a question I think most people would be familiar with.
It could be that, this is just off the top of my head from talking to people, but that's always a really tough aspect of river use and even along the river and picnic areas and everything else. But my takeaway from thinking about all these different things is to compartmentalize and to make sure that you have areas for people to do the kinds of things they want to do, so that there's a place on your river for everyone, and people will go to where they can do stuff in the way that they want to do it. So maybe there should be a place where people can go to party, but certain parts of the river that's not going to happen, or different days of the week or something like that.
So I think we're about at the end of the hour. If there are no other questions, Chris, I'd like to think about user capacity from the visitor perspective as much as the manager perspective. Are perceptions changing about crowding? Are we meeting the evolving public where they are or where we want them to be? I feel like use is changing, so capacity solutions and opportunities might be too.
Very good point.
Yeah, I think so. I think the challenge with any outdoor management thing for the last year is how to, particularly with the increase in accidents and fatalities, is how do you communicate with the people who would otherwise have been at Little League? You know, they're brand new users. They didn't go to a school. They bought their, you know, their tube for $5 at Costco. How do you reach them with a safety message or precautions or how to dress warmly? That's like $64,000 question, I think. That almost deserves a special session all by itself. So Angie, you want to talk about this, the coming up stuff? Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, I put a link in the chat to our next well, to just the river management roundtables in general, and there you're going to find a registration link. In 2 weeks we'll be getting together under our other track, the one that's a little bit more about like looking at cultural competency and equitable workspaces, and we're going to be looking at differences and how we experience differences and appreciate differences, especially within the workplace. So I encourage you all to come and join us for some more great discussion. And then again, beginning of August, we'll probably be coming out maybe with a roundtable that's again more like kind of on the water focus. So.
Yeah, if there was a deeper dive that folks wanted to do, we don't have one scheduled. We could do it a month from now. So want to honor your time, you guys, and thanks for being here. We will post both the chat and the recording on our website. And thanks for being here. Thanks, John. Thanks, Dave, all the folks who contributed, and Kevin.